One unmistakable truth: healthy soil is alive. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but literally alive. Built from trillions of microbes, networks of fungi, tiny insects, and of course, earthworms, working like silent engineers beneath your feet. And the more life you have below the surface, the more abundance you'll harvest above it. But here's the twist. Most gardeners will tell you that bringing soil back to life requires fertilizer, or compost, or expensive soil amendments that promise miracles in a bag. But what if I told you that a single ordinary ingredient, something sitting quietly in your kitchen right now, could wake up your soil almost instantly? What if this simple thing could call earthworms from every direction, turning a dull, compacted, lifeless bed into a vibrant, breathing ecosystem? I'm talking about rice, the humble grain that half the world depends on for food, yet almost no one realizes can also feed the hidden world beneath the garden surface. For now, just imagine this. You scatter or bury a small amount of rice in a tired garden bed, walk away, and return days later to find the soil shifting, moving, alive. As earthworms gather in such numbers, it looks like the ground itself is waking up. That's the moment many gardeners describe as their turning point. The instant they realize soil doesn't come back to life through force, but through feeding the smallest creatures first. And it all begins with something as unassuming as rice. Before we even think about dropping a handful of rice into the soil, we have to understand the guests we're hoping to attract. Earthworms aren't just a sign of healthy soil. They create healthy soil. They are the quiet engineers beneath our feet, rewriting the landscape grain by grain, tunnel by tunnel, cast by cast. For more than a century, soil scientists have studied worms with a sort of reverence. Charles Darwin spent the final decades of his life observing them, eventually concluding that worms are as essential to the Earth's surface as glaciers, wind, and rain. Modern research has only reinforced that idea. Studies published in Soil Biology and Biochemistry, Applied Soil Ecology, and the Journal of Environmental Quality show that when earthworms are present, the entire architecture of soil transforms. Their tunnels act like natural ventilation shafts, improving airflow by as much as 30% and allowing roots to breathe in compacted ground where plants once struggled. Water behaves differently too. Soils inhabited by healthy worm populations can absorb nearly double the amount of rainfall before runoff begins, meaning less erosion and more moisture stored right where plants need it. But the most astonishing transformation happens at the microscopic level. A teaspoon of worm castings, those tiny dark grains left behind after digestion, is often richer in plant-available nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium than the soil around it. Multiple studies show levels 5 to 11 times higher, depending on the worm species and diet. Farmers using vermicompost have reported yield increases of 20 to 25%, even in poor soils, simply because the nutrients are delivered in a form plants can immediately use. It's as if the worms take the raw ingredients of the earth and turn them into a refined, bioavailable fertilizer. Yet nutrients are only part of the story. What worms truly excel at is creating living soil. Their bodies are ecosystems of their own, packed with bacteria, fungi, and enzymes that continue working long after the castings are deposited. Every tunnel they carve becomes a microbial highway. Every movement through the soil mixes organic matter with minerals in ways no human tool can mimic. They don't just build soil, they animate it. But here's the detail most gardeners never hear, even though researchers emphasize it again and again. Worms don't eat soil. They eat the microbes on the soil. Their diet isn't dirt, leaves, compost, or kitchen scraps, not directly. Instead, they rely on microscopic bacteria and fungi that colonize those materials. Worms follow microbial hotspots the way wolves follow herds. Wherever bacteria bloom, worms arrive. Wherever fungi begin breaking down organic matter, Worms trail behind them, consuming the microbial biomass and releasing nutrient-rich casts that supercharge plant growth. This single fact changes everything about how we attract worms. Because if worms are hunting microbes, then the real question is not, what do worms like? But what sparks an explosion of microbial life so powerful that worms can't resist it? And this is where our story begins to shift. Because one of the simplest, most overlooked triggers of microbial activity is a common, humble pantry staple that almost every household has. A grain that decays fast enough to ignite a microbial bloom, yet gentle enough not to harm the soil when used correctly. That grain, of course, is rice. And understanding why rice works means understanding the biology of worms, not as squirmy garden creatures, but as key players in one of the most efficient nutrient cycling systems nature has ever designed. Rice works in the soil because, to tiny creatures underground, it's like dropping candy into a playground. Rice is mostly made of starch, which is really just long chains of sugar. When rice gets wet in the soil, those long sugars break apart into smaller sugars. And guess what loves sugar? Microbes. The teeny tiny living things in dirt that you can't see without a microscope. As soon as those microbes smell the sugar, they rush in. They start eating like crazy, grow super fast, and make more and more of themselves. It's like someone just opened a free buffet underground. But rice doesn't just have sugar. It has tiny bits of minerals, things like magnesium and manganese, that help fungi grow. Fungi are like the helpful chefs of the soil. They spread out, break things down, and make the ground healthier. And earthworms love fungi too, because fungi make the dirt taste better to them. Another reason rice works so well is because of water. Cooked rice is soft and squishy, kind of like little pillows that hold water. Even uncooked rice soaks up water quickly. And microbes need water to wake up and start working. So whenever rice gets wet underground, it becomes the perfect place for microbes to have a big party. And because each grain of rice is small but has lots of outside surface, it gives microbes a lot of places to sit, eat, and grow. A single handful of rice has hundreds of tiny microbe parking spaces, much more than something big like a banana peel or a leaf. Now here's the fun part. When all these microbes start eating the rice, they give off smells and signals that earthworms can sense. Worms can't see or hear, but they can feel these signals in the soil. It tells them, hey, there's food over here. So they crawl toward the rice area. This is why rice works faster than things like banana peels, grass, coffee grounds, or cardboard. Those things take a long time to break down. Rice works in just a day or two. It's soft, easy to eat, and full of simple sugars the microbes can grab right away. So when you bury a little rice in a garden, the microbes rush in first. Then fungi join them. Then worms follow. And suddenly, a quiet patch of dirt becomes busy, alive, and full of wiggly workers helping your plants grow. It's like starting a tiny party underground. And the worms never miss a good party. Now that we understand why rice works, we can finally talk about how to use it. Because while rice is incredibly powerful underground, it's also something you need to use with intention. Too much in the wrong place can create problems. But the right amount, in the right way, can transform a tired garden bed faster than almost anything else. The first and fastest method is using cooked rice. Plain cooked rice, nothing added, no oil, no salt, is basically the instant version of this technique. When you spread a light layer of it across the soil and tuck it under an inch or two of mulch, you're setting up a perfect little feast for microbes. Because the rice is already soft and hydrated, decomposition begins almost immediately. Microbes start moving in within hours, and by the next day, you can often see subtle signs of life returning. Moisture held closer to the surface, tiny tunnels forming, and sometimes even worm castings appearing sooner than you'd expect. This method is especially helpful in beds that feel lifeless, the kind that look dry, compacted, and empty. A bit of cooked rice before planting leafy greens or herbs can give the soil a quick kickstart, making it friendlier for seedlings right away. And as long as you keep the top layer moist, but not sopping wet, the rice will break down cleanly and efficiently. But not everyone wants fast results. Sometimes you want something that works more slowly, something that lasts. That's where uncooked or broken rice comes in. Uncooked rice takes time to soften, swell, and break apart. And that slow breakdown creates a more extended microbial bloom underground. When you crush it slightly and bury it a couple of inches deep, you're essentially planting tiny, time-release capsules of food for microbes. This method shines in raised beds, where soil tends to dry out faster and organic matter disappears quickly. Mixing the rice with carbon-rich materials, like dry leaves or shredded paper, helps everything decompose evenly and prevents clumping. It won't bring worms running overnight, but over the next several weeks, you'll see a steady increase in worm tunnels, a richer soil texture, and microbial activity that stays active longer. Then there's the gentlest method of all, rice water. The cloudy water left over after rinsing rice looks simple, but it's loaded with starch molecules. When you pour that water onto your soil, the starch coats the particles almost instantly. Microbes pick up on that thin film of food right away. Unlike whole grains of rice, rice water doesn't sit on the soil. It doesn't attract pests. It just seeps in and starts feeding the microbial community without leaving anything behind on the surface. This is a favorite for potted plants, houseplants, and small raised beds, places where you want the microbial boost, but don't want to bury organic matter. And applying it once a week can keep a steady rhythm of microbial activity going, especially during the growing season. And finally, we have the method that worm keepers swear by, using rice inside a worm bin. Worms go absolutely wild for rice, but only in small amounts. If you sprinkle a modest portion of cooked or soaked rice into a worm bin and mix it with shredded paper, dry leaves, or cardboard strips, the worms will swarm the area within hours. The microbes break the rice down first, then the worms move in to finish the job. This method is particularly helpful if you want to increase your production of worm castings, those nutrient-rich pellets that plants love so much. But because a worm bin is a closed system, you have to be careful. Too much rice can ferment, turn sour, and create pockets of anaerobic bacteria, which worms dislike. The key is balance. A little rice goes a long way, and when used correctly, it gives you some of the richest worm castings you'll ever make at home. So whether you're using cooked rice for quick action, uncooked rice for long-term feeding, rice water for a gentle microbial flush, or a small amount in a worm bin to supercharge castings, the principle is the same. You're not feeding the soil directly. You're feeding the life inside it. And when that life wakes up, everything else improves. The texture, the moisture, the fertility, and ultimately, the health of the plants that depend on that hidden world beneath your feet. And this is the moment many gardeners describe as the turning point. The moment they realize this rice trick isn't a gimmick or a hack. It's ecology. Pure, simple biology, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Because when you feed the base of the soil food chain, everything above it shifts. Plants root deeper, leaves grow thicker, water lingers longer, and worms, more worms than you ever expected, start appearing in places that were once silent and barren. And that's the beauty of it. Rice doesn't fix the soil for you. It awakens the soil so it can fix itself. But as powerful as rice can be, there's a line you don't want to cross. Because the same fast energy that wakes up microbes can also overwhelm them if you dump in too much at once. When that happens, the soil shifts from breathing to suffocating. Instead of sweet, earthy aromas, you start getting the sour smell of anaerobic fermentation, The kind of smell that tells you microbes are drowning, not thriving. Too much rice can trigger fuzzy white mold blooms on the surface, attract fruit flies searching for fermentation gases, even invite rodents if the rice is left exposed. None of this means rice is dangerous. It simply means it's potent. A little fuels the underground ecosystem. A lot can smother it. So the rule is simple. Use rice like seasoning, not like a main ingredient. A single cup per 10 square feet, every 2 or 3 weeks, is more than enough to spark microbial activity without tipping the balance. Rice water? That's gentle enough to pour weekly without worry. And in worm bins, a tablespoon per pound of worms keeps castings production high without turning the bedding sour. Used lightly, rice becomes a fast, clean source of microbial energy. Used heavily, it becomes a burden the soil has to fight through. Balance is the key. A small amount goes a long way, and when you follow that rhythm, the results stay smooth, steady, and safe. And now that we've seen what happens in one garden, let's step back and look at what the research says, because this isn't just anecdotal. Around the world, scientists, farmers, and vermiculture experts have been seeing the same pattern. Give the soil simple carbohydrates like rice, and the underground world responds fast. At the University of Washington, soil ecologists ran controlled tests comparing different organic materials. What they discovered was striking. When they added starch-rich matter to the soil, materials very similar to cooked rice, worm biomass didn't just increase, it surged. Within a single month, earthworm populations grew by nearly half, a change far too dramatic to be explained by coincidence. Something about that carbohydrate boost jump-started the system. Across the ocean, Japanese rice farmers have been quietly witnessing the same thing for generations. In fields where rice straw, rice hulls, or even tiny bits of leftover rice end up in the soil, worm numbers grow noticeably larger year after year. Farmers describe these worms as field healers because their tunnels soften the paddy soil they would otherwise compact underwater. The link is simple. Rice breaks down fast, microbes explode, and worms follow the microbial scent. At Cornell's Soil Ecology Lab, researchers dug deeper into the microbial side of the story. When they gave soil microbes pure carbohydrates, simple sugars similar to what rice breaks into, microbial populations grew up to 10 times faster than when fed cellulose-based materials like leaves or cardboard. In soil science, that's an enormous jump. And as we now know, microbes are the dinner worms are searching for. Then there are the vermiculture experts, the people who raise worms for a living. Many of them use rice, rice bran, or rice water as starter foods for new bins. Why? Because worms respond almost immediately once microbial activity spikes. You'll often see worm breeders use just a tablespoon or two, knowing that's enough to create a hotspot that brings worms clustering together within hours. And in tropical agricultural studies, the pattern becomes even more dramatic. In warm, humid climates, rice decomposes almost instantly, up to 3 times faster than hardwood leaves. That rapid breakdown means faster microbial growth, faster worm attraction, and far quicker soil recovery after droughts or heavy use. Put simply, everywhere researchers look, the conclusion points in the same direction. Rice works because biology says it should. Fast energy fuels microbes. Microbes fuel worms. Worms rebuild the soil. It's not magic. It's just nature moving quickly when you give it the right spark.